Okay.
What's going on, y'all?
I pity
I got the big hat.
That's right.
You are the big boss. You are for all of those of you who are not watching on YouTube right now, I pity you because Jim Johnson has come on with the most comedic Yosemite Sam level hat so that he can run. This makes him, we all bow down to him for this episode of Continuing Conversations. And you'll know why when we get to the pack, talking about the pack list.
He's asserting his dominance. Yeah.
This is great. We're jumping right in.
Go
ahead, John.
If one of us takes the hat, we become the new Linet developer. That's how I'm understanding this.
Or if I find a bigger hat right now.
Oh, that's a challenge. You see,
if you can find one, I'll tell you though, this foam hat is ungodly hot. So I'll tell you this. This is what I do for my fans.
Well, I'm the only one in California. Actually, I'm the only one in the Pacific Southwest and California right now. So I have the biggest chance of going out and knocking on one of my neighbor's doors and finding a sombrero. All right. This is going to be a fun episode. This one's going to work. I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm with, welcome to another episode of Continuing Conversations. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek RPG and also a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for Modivia's RPG, Star Trek Adventures. And of course, we have with us a great crew tonight, starting with the big-hatted Lord of all Packlids, Jim Johnson.
Hey, everybody, I got the big hat on. I got the big hat.
You are smart.
I am smart. I am the smartest. Anyway, I'm Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, published by Modiphius Entertainment these many years. Co-host on this here show with Michael, going on 70-something episodes now. I've lost track. And excited to be here. Excited to be talking all about, you know it, Lower Decks.
Lower Decks.
We've been on this news for a long time, and here we are. Whoop, whoop.
It's about time. We're going to have a whole series breaking down the chapters, and we have a great casting star with us today. Let's start alphabetical order, make life easy. Ron.
Well, I'm Aaron Pallier. I'm a longtime freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures. I've worn a lot of hats, I guess, in the writing, but today my hat is not as big as Jim's.
All right, and alphabetical, we go to Al.
How's it going? Al Spader, freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures. Had a lot of different little things in this book and had a blast doing it. I can't wait to talk about it with you all, and can't wait to see what the fan reaction is going to be.
And again, for all of those of you tuning in, not on YouTube, you will notice that Al is wearing the Starbase 80 shirt. We can't talk anything more about it. Next guy.
Starbase 80?
We can't talk about it. We can't talk about it.
All I got was this lousy T-shirt.
Yeah.
Those poor bastards.
Oh, man. All right. And finally, that brings us to John. Introduce yourself.
Hey, so I've been a writer for Modiphius for, so many years now. And been working on Star Trek Adventures since the beginning. And I'm hugely stoked to talk to you about Lower Decks because, as Jim will tell anybody, the moment Lower Decks was even dropped online, I'm just messaging Jim like, we've got to do this. This will be so cool. So pretty excited.
All right, we got to give it back to you, Jim. Jim, take the lead on it. And are you going to try to wear that hat the whole time? Because I hope you do.
Until my head just starts sweating. Yes, I'll keep it on for a while because it's not too tight. But like I said, this foam does not breathe, and it's really hot. But you know what I'm thinking? What's interesting, and I'm going to do a little non sequitur here. The hat is folded up by these two brads, right? And these are just basic brads like you would see in like a movie screenplay. It's just a punch hole and it flips. And so if we ever do like a Rios kind of special thing, I can turn one of these flaps down into his pimp hat that he wore on that one episode. So this could be like it could be my cowboy hat, but then it could be like a pimp hat if I put one down. And if I find a big enough feather, I can wear this at the Ren Fair.
I thought you were going to do this as some sort of play on words and say like Brad's as in Brad Boimler, but never mind.
Yeah, not that
Beat
clever.
me to the joke by that much, Mike.
I was waiting for it. Okay. So Jim, you go ahead and do the intro for this book. Talk to us about it and why people should be excited about it. We all are.
Sure thing. So this is right. Star Trek Lower Decks. So we've had the Star Trek Adventures license since 2016. And we started working on the game even before Discovery came out. I think Discovery was announced somewhere in the shuffle of us working on the game. And of course, we didn't get Discovery for a while. But like when Lower Decks hit the airwaves, and a lot of people were really excited about it. And like almost immediately, the question was, okay, when are we going to start seeing some Star Trek Adventures material for Lower Decks? And it was like, hold on, we don't even have the license yet. You got to relax, calm down. These things take time, right? Because Paramount obviously has got their things going on, and they want to give it a chance to just see what it does. Like if it was a flop, then they wouldn't be giving out the license to anybody. But obviously, it turned out to be a big success, big hit. 3 seasons out, season 4 is in the works. Season 5 has been greenlit, so Lower Decks will be around for a while. It's a wonderfully irreverent look at Star Trek, but it's also super funny and super reverential to the series too. Like there's so much love in every episode. I mean, you can see, you can just feel it. And they put in so many Easter eggs in every episode. And what I'm really impressed is how much story they pack into 22 minutes or 23 minutes or whatever. Like every episode is dense, right? It's just not one-off jokes and they're done. Like there's a lot of stuff packed into these episodes. So if you haven't watched it yet, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go check it out. Personally, it took me a little while to warm up to it, like 4 or 5 episodes, but man, once I was into it, they were flying on all thrusters. And I'll be eager to go around the screen and get everybody's reactions to what they thought of Lower Decks as a whole. So actually, let's do that before we jump into the book itself. And I'll just start with John. What was your initial reactions to Lower Decks when it hit the screen, and what do you think of it?
Well, man, just first of all, I just go off to acknowledge the fact that Trek has been around for so long, has had so many episodes, and it's such a cultural impact that they can make a tribute show essentially, because it's really what Lower Decks is, and it's all punching up humor. And even the times when it does make fun of the Star Trek universe, it's always in ways that never leaves you walking away where you're dissatisfied. Like season 2, when they're going through that collector's collection, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, Spock's giant skeleton, and it's like, that was a dumb episode. Mm-hmm. For those who are curious, find the animated series. It's weird. The animated series was just far out there, but yeah, no, I love it, and I've just always been excited. There's really not an episode that I'm just kind of like only warm on, and I get that I'm a big fan. Obviously, working on the game and everything, but it's nice, and I think after so many years of having people tell jokes that are sometimes mean-spirited, like the Shatner segment from Saturday Night Live, where, he's telling all Trek fans to get a life. And, you laugh with it because you're all like, oh, yeah, I'm not one of those Trek fans. Oh, no. Yeah. But getting to watch a show where you actually can you don't have to hide, you turn the cloaking device off and your entire Trek persona just comes out as visible. And for me, it was a celebration of everything. I mean, I know that we just got through Picard, and Picard, celebrated Next Generation. This celebrated all Trek, and for me, I was laughing and I was groaning, and it was just fantastic. So I'm excited that we have up till season 5. I'm hoping we go to 7. But again, as I pointed out earlier, where the moment it dropped, I'm messaging Jim like, we've got to do this. So can't be more pleased.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Awesome. Thanks for those insights. Really appreciate it. Al, what are some of your thoughts on Lower Decks there?
So I'm excited whenever there's a new Star Trek something announced. I love that it can fill niches that different fans are into, niches that might bring in new fans. And I got to say that I watched season 1, the first couple episodes, I think 3 times before it clicked with me. Lower Decks finally made sense. I understood that like John was saying, that it's really a tribute to Star Trek as a whole. And I really started to fall in love with the characters. And then, the comedy, I realized that it wasn't making fun of Star Trek to be malicious. It was making fun of jokes to bring the Star Trek fans together. And by the end of season 1, like, they were telling an epic story that was like, I'm like, how are you doing this in 20 minutes? Like, I was on the edge of my seat, it was just crazy. So so it took me a few episodes. I had to watch those first couple times each before it finally clicked.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. All right, Aaron, what are some of your thoughts?
I think when the first episode aired, I was immediately drawn into the show by Tendi. Tendi was like my gateway character into totally like grasping right away what the show was, because she had that wild-eyed joy of just being on a starship. And I'm like, that's exactly what I would be. And I think that's what most fans would be, stepping on board a starship for the first time. I don't care if it's grungy. I don't care if it's poorly maintained. I don't care if it's just a California class. I'm on a starship in Starfleet and I'm going to have fun. Mm-hmm. I'm having fun doing my job. And that kind of joy in a lot of ways goes right through the entire series so far. It's a joy of being in Starfleet, of being friends with people, of having these adventures, even if they're dangerous, scary, whatever. This is what we're driven to do, and we do it because we love it. And yes, so obviously I love the show.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And Michael, let's wrap it up here, or wrap up this piece of it. Tell us about your thoughts about Lower Decks.
Sure. First, I'll go with my favorite character. Since Aaron is going with Tendi, I'm going with Jack Ransom. I'm sorry, if I was on a ship, that's who I would be. He's my favorite first officer. Just again, similar to Tendi, he loves his job. He has no shame that he's doing second contact as opposed to first contact. Why I love Lower Decks in particular, Jim, you knew that and I've said this before, since I started writing for Star Trek Adventures, I pitched humor, and you've sent back to me a couple of times, it's subjective. And I put my head down and I get serious and I write, more serious stuff. So when I found out we had a license for Lower Decks, I remember, I think I emailed you, I may have spoken to you, I can't remember, but I was like, please, you're putting me on this, and please, I can be my full self. And you're like, yeah, go for it. So I just loved it, because anyone who's seen any of my published work, my manga comic, it is the most dark humored, cynical thing about kids in school and all that stuff. And so Lower Decks fit the bill for me perfectly. When I first watched it, I did make a mistake, however. I usually have the habit of watching Star Trek right before I go to bed because it relaxes me. So I found that watching Lower Decks for the first time did exactly the opposite. I was so alert and hyped. It was like drinking a 5-hour energy drink that I had to like pause it for a second. Like, this is going to have the reverse effect of relaxing me. So I actually waited till the next day to watch it when I'm a little bit more awake. And I kept away from any social media devices, because I warn anybody who has not seen the show, you cannot miss a beat. The jokes and the Easter eggs are flying faster. So 22 minutes, like I think Al said, is packed with like an hour and a half worth of Easter eggs, side jokes, quick-witted. So I just tell people, put your phones away. It's only 22 minutes. Pay attention, and you're going to really enjoy the show. So again, writing it for me, I have to say it has been my favorite piece to work on so far for the Star Trek Adventures line.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, excellent. And I'll just add, something I don't think anybody expected this when they were watching the show, but the Pakleds, like, how were the Pakleds the big threat of the galaxy? Like, where did that come from? I mean, that's an inspired piece of humor right there, pulling for Mike McMahon and his team to pull that out. Because, it just worked out so nicely for Star Trek Adventures personally, because all the way back from the core book, I know I've talked about it before, I wrote a couple sidebars about the Pakleds being one of the first Alpha Quadrant species to delve into the Gamma Quadrant, and I was like, that'd just be funny. And I just kind of continued that thread. And I know some of the other writers have picked that up, and we dropped in Pakled references to a lot of the books. And like I think one of my friends watched the Lower Decks episode with the Packlids before I did, and they were like, "Oh my God, did you see the episode? You got to watch the episode." I was like, "What? What's going on?" It's like, "Oh my God, it's Packlids."
And that built this. Yeah, and that built the springboard for this book too. If anybody wants to know, people are asking about, give me a Romulan source book. We decided to do the Packlet source book first, and that's called Lower Decks.
And actually, there's quite a bit of Packlet stuff in this book, believe it or not. We got I'll tease it a little bit because we can't show the screen yet, but we got a playable character species, right? So playable Packlets are playable species. We've got the clump gun, and then Aaron wrote up a whole bunch of ships. For Packlet, so all the different clump ships. We got like 5 or 6 different sizes of ships. So like no matter what scale your ship is, there's a Packlet adversary capable of taking you on and defeating you and absorbing you into their version of the collective or whatever. There's also some other stuff in there. I'll encourage people to check it out and find it. And of course, we got big hats in the book too. So the graphic designer Chris Webb, he had a lot of fun making some badgies, some custom badgies in the book. And so you'll see badges in here with a lot of different hats, and including one really big one. So have fun with that. All right. Anyway, so that being said, we're going to talk about the introduction and chapter 1 tonight. So we're going to try to make this a relatively streamlined, focused show. We'll see how much we riff on it as we go. But we're going to do a bunch of these episodes, and we're going to string them along here, leading up to the pre-order date, which is currently planned for early June. And then there'll probably be some episodes after that too. And there'll be just a ton of other stuff to come. So buckle in, folks, because if you love Lower Decks, you're going to have like 2 months worth of fun stuff. And you know what? If you hate Lower Decks, that's okay too. Just, watch our old episodes. There's 70 episodes to watch. And, take a little break and get ready for like episode 90 or something where we'll talk about, I don't know, something different.
But you'll be making a mistake if you don't watch these, because these are probably going to be the funniest episodes, like because we can really let loose and we can riff on our own insider jokes on Star Trek, which is cool.
Yeah, but I will say, like, even if you're not a fan of the show, there's a ton of content in this book that will be relevant to you in your campaign, even if you're not doing funny Lower Decks style kind of series. Like even if you're doing like Lower Decks from Next Generation, like that episode Lower Decks. And much more serious and dark in tone. Like there's content in this book that will absolutely help you with that. So don't just dismiss the fact that we're going Lower Decks here. So just with like all of our books, right? I try to drop some surprises in here and try to give you some unexpected things in here that make you think about it and go, oh, there's more to this book than I was expecting. Like I think the Discovery Campaign guide is a good example, right? Not to knock on that, not to knock the. Not to promote that one too much, but there is more stuff in there than just Discovery. So, you're doing
right. We're just like Utopia Planitia. Some people thought it was only going to be ships, and it ended up being a lot. People who are picking up are like, whoa, or even the Game Masters and Players Guide. People thought it was going to be a redux of the rules, and it was not. So I know, Jim, your orders to us were also to not only, get into the fun of Lower Decks, but also give people something that makes it valuable for them.
Yep. So we opened up the book with a foreword. Mike McMahon, the creator of Lower Decks, was gracious enough to write a foreword for us. So I encourage you to check that out. He talks a little bit about his D&D gaming experience and how that relates to his life as a gamer and a creator. And it was very kind of him to write that for us. So thank you, Mike. If you're watching this, I really appreciate it. Appreciate you and all the work you and your team do over at Titmouse and Paramount and CBS and all the other logos that I don't remember off the top of my head. But
he said Titmouse.
I did. All right. And then we go to the introduction. Introduction is pretty straightforward. I mean, if you've read our books, you know what the introductions bring to you. I don't know that there's any real surprises here other than we dropped in a reference to the animated series in there. And we've also got a essential viewing sidebar. This one was pretty easy, though, because like the essential viewing for this is Lower Decks. Like the episodes are 20 minutes long. Go watch 3 of them in the time it'll take you to watch one one regular Star Trek episode. So, you can pick and choose if you want. And, there's some episodes that are better than others, subjectively. But I think it's worth watching all of them because they're just so fun. And there's so many great references and Easter eggs and stuff. There's also a little bit of guidance about running a non-Starfleet game. So like we've seen one of the episodes showed us the lower deck life on other starships and other polities. You can absolutely do that with this book. If you want to do Klingons, Vulcans, Ferengi, Packlids, Andorians, whatever, Borg even, you'll find some content in here that'll help you run lower decks experiences with those. And then we jump into chapter 1, and this is where I'll stop talking, and I'll encourage John and Al and Aaron and Michael to talk a little bit about this. I think you all delivered the goods on this one in spades. And so I'll stop there. I got a little bit of editorial comment to say after the fact, but John, I know you wrote a good chunk of this, so why don't you kick us off a little bit, talk about what you contributed to chapter 1.
Man, actually, it's so funny. As I was reading through this chapter, I was like, man, what did I write? This is all awesome. I know this is not all me. Mm-hmm. There's just so much great work goes into this, and being able to read it again and laugh. And also, I think just to brag on my colleagues here for a second, you know how in our books we've got those little sidebars that pop up where it's like someone's log? Fantastic. I'm getting choked up. Fantastic work throughout the book. There's a lot of funny jokes, and I know we were all a little worried about us being funny in a book, but it was really good. But I think for me, one of the things about this chapter, about the galactic overview and all that. So we've talked about, the history of Trek in the books. We've talked about, like World War III, the Federation Klingon conflict, all of this. It's nice sometimes, though, to sit back and just like see it from a different perspective. And it's not just like a bunch of people joking about history. It's not like we're all sitting around making jokes about the Revolutionary War or or the 16th century. This felt like, one, Boimler trying to teach us a bunch of information really, really quickly, which we'll get back to Boimler and how he's represented throughout the book because it's really hysterical. But this felt more like a bunch of people trying to, you're sitting around like on a bunch of couches and you're talking about things like, the Pakleds, they're a major threat out of nowhere. What's up with that? And I love how that comes through. I love that, for some people, they might have the concern that this book is just, insert joke, wait 5 seconds, insert second joke. It all flows together really, really well. And so looking at this and seeing Boimler's face, it's funny. I'm remembering a Star Trek posting group that I know that Jim and I are both in. And I remember people saying, I just hate Boimler's stupid face. And I'm like, oh, it's stupid face right here. He's trying to teach us history.
I think one of the things I like that you did the most, John, out of here was we so often in many of the other books or even publications always make it seem like, Starfleet is only about these border crises with all these polities coming in to crush us. But the voice you wrote in made it seem like, oh, you know what? We're going to be okay in the Alpha Quadrant now. Here's what we got to do to maintain and kind of pull ourselves back together. And I really like that you did that voice because I, for one, watched Star Trek for the hopefulness. And so it was nice to have a book where I'm like, wow, we have a book about, okay, we know all this is going on out there, but inside we're kind of keeping it all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's the nice thing about Boimler is that for any of the writers who got to write in his voice, I think it's the fact that it's optimistic. He is, if I had to compare him to someone, he is 1980 Star Trek fan, where for him, it's all up from here. It was already pretty high. It's only going higher. And yeah, he wants to impress you. Like, we're going to get to that later. But, Boimler is the guy who will name drop himself in a conversation.
I love that.
Yeah. And so, but it's the fact that he's kind of like, it's no big deal. Served on the USS Titan. You've probably heard of it. Anyway, so the warp reactor is going critical. And it's like, wow, you just go from, it's just really cool. And I like it. And also, it's just the fact that there are times when you see that his ego just drops out entirely. And I hope we captured that tone really well. And also just, so it's nice to be able to look at the world of Star Trek differently, like still positive. It's not like we were setting out to break the utopia, but it was nice to just have a bunch of people sitting around going, yeah, no, it's really great working in the lower decks until Q shows up. And then that's just 5 hours out of our day, which we did not have time for. Buffer time can only fix so much.
Well, remember, in order to look up at Starfleet, you have to be in the lower deck. So that kind of viewpoint makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the opening chapter sets up the tone of lower decks really well, and not just as ensigns looking upwards towards, the higher ranks in the bridge, but it's also looking from the center of the Federation outwards, that not all of the problems that the Federation faces that Starfleet has to deal with are these major border crises, that aren't these major galaxy ending problems. Sometimes it's just installing a new atmospheric, processor for, a planet that's undergoing terraforming, or, bringing a random rogue AI element back to Daystrom because nobody else is able to at the moment. You're the closest people. Shuttle this guy back. I love that kind of tone that focuses in on the smaller scale, and that's where a lot of fun can happen.
Yeah, and I think a lot with this first chapter, Star Trek Adventures was set in 2368 initially in the core rule book, right? And we started progressing that forward as as the writers went through the Delta Quadrant books and the Gamma Quadrant books and whatnot. But there's this gap of time post Dominion War that we don't really know what was happening in the Alpha and Beta quadrants, right? Because Voyager, all that stuff happened really far away and in the Delta Quadrant. So we kind of had to pick up the pieces of the Dominion War and connect that to 2380, right? So what has happened in that time in a post-war galaxy? And I think that because we hop from faction to faction to faction in this section, we do a really good job of trying to give that snapshot of where the galaxy is at.
Yeah, which helps. And go ahead, Jim. You're on mute. I saw you moving your lips.
Sorry, I was on mute. That's what I was just going to say. That's one of the things I appreciate about you all is that you always rise to the challenge. When I say, okay, look, what we got to do is we got to bridge, like in the Discovery book, we had to bridge Enterprise to beginning of Discovery. So like we got to figure out, like canon hasn't really touched that chunk of time yet. So we need to bridge that gap, at least provide some insight into for gamers and game masters and players, because that's the kind of stuff that we need as role players to get our characters in our head and to figure out what's been happening and where did they come from and all that stuff. And we had to do the same thing with this book to wit that, like you said, Al, that 20-year gap in time, 15, 20, I don't know, maybe 10 years between the end of the Dominion War and 2380. So what's that, 23? Well, actually, the end of Nemesis, really, right? 70, 23. There's a chunk of time in there that we don't know a lot about. And we know that the Hobus supernova is coming, but we're not there yet, right? We're creeping up to it. And then we also know Picard is another 15 years later. So there's this weird time thing that we had to kind of play with and fill in a little bit. And I think you all did great with it. So kudos to all of you for rising to that challenge. And I'm sure I'll be asking you again, because there's still big chunks of time that canon hasn't touched yet that we've got to figure out how are we going to bridge that so we can continue to build it into the books. And someday, you look at Star Trek Adventures and you'll see a continuity from Enterprise all the way out to the 32nd century. And won't that be cool? Knock on wood.
I would love to I love writing about history. And for when I had to do that for the Discovery, and it's like, oh, right, all the way up to 32nd century. And then I'm like, Jim, I've got a problem. I have too many words and you don't like it when I'm this far over. So certain things are going to have to be cut. And just if that ever becomes an actual book, I will be there. But that represents one of the unique challenges for when you're working on, even on Lower Decks, but also in the other books. Like, what is canon? Like, in some ways, it's easy to figure out. Like, oh, when it comes to Picard, the show, canon. But then it's like, oh, where do the graphic novels sit? Because they advertise themselves as canon, but are they canon? And then you just go from there. And I remember the old extended universe, which as we're watching Picard, I was telling my brother everything about the final Borg War in the old extended universe. He's like, that's awesome. You should write about it. And I'm like, oh, that universe is dead. That's a parallel universe. We're not touching that one. That universe is gone. And it's you want to draw from elements of that universe, but at the same time, you can't. I mean, one, obviously the licensing issues, but two, you can't just pull one thread from that old universe. You would have to be like, you have to pull, entire, just clumps of plots for it to make sense. And while the old universe had some cool stuff, I big Star Trek nerd, obviously, but there are also times when it was just kind of silly. And so it would just be like, oh, are we going to write a whole book about the Q continuum? It's like, no, that book gave me a headache. I hated reading Zero as a name by the time I got to the end of the book. But yeah, just figuring out what we can and cannot use. Like, I don't know about like with everyone else. I mean, when you guys were creating stuff for the book, did you feel like you had a hard time sticking to just the show, or was it just other things that you wanted to pull in?
I guess I didn't have a problem with it, but I don't tend to read a lot of the extended stuff like graphic novels. I do read some of the novels, but I am able to like compartmentalize that fairly well. Yeah. So I guess I maybe a little bit at times, but yeah, mostly no.
Yeah, I always reference beta canon just when I'm trying to get a bigger picture of who or whatever it is I'm trying to write about. Because lots of times, there's not a ton of information about a specific ship or about a character. But then when you look at the beta canon, you realize, oh, this character has been used several times and they might have, this focus or whatever. So that's kind of where I go with it. If you need to fill in gaps, I think that beta canon's a good place to check. That's how I usually go about it.
Yeah, I'm into between episode beta canon usually, or between movie beta canon, because they purposely did not try to deviate too much. And so that they're just saying, this is just a story we never had time to tell. And that kind of excites me. Like the Vanguard series, love the Vanguard series. I'm on book 4 right now. And that one, I cheered out loud when Carol Marcus shows up and sorry, spoiler, I'm like, yeah, it's because now we get to enrich.
That's very good. That's very good.
Right. Series, and we need to enrich in that character. So that's where I like it. In the end, I always ask Badgie. Badgie's the final call on beta canon.
Yeah, and I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Like I'm just a big Star Trek fan, so I've read the comic books, I've read the novels, I've read the graphic novels, all that stuff, and I always appreciate when you all are able to find Easter eggs to drop in here. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not so subtle, and sometimes it's so subtle that I don't even catch it. And then like sometimes Scott will catch it and he'll say, "Oh, this." But sometimes stuff gets past Scott too, and that's okay, right? Because like there's a lot of stuff from my life and my campaigns that have found its way into the books, and I'm sure it's true for most of you as well. That we add our own little personal touches to this thing, and we know it's there, and it doesn't matter if other people know it's there because we know it's there, and that's our little love letter to ourselves, as part of the Star Trek Continuum. Because I guarantee you, every single producer, every single technical person who works on the shows puts that stuff into the show, whether you see it or not. Like I remember, Mike Okuda and the whole art department at TNG and all the other shows. Like at the time, standard definition television could not display the signs and the placards and stuff that on the set designs, right? So they knew no one was going to be able to read it. So they put all kinds of in jokes and references in there. And then it was only until like the next gen remaster that they were like, oh, wait a minute, people can read those now. And then you can like zoom in on it and
that's cool.
See what was in there. So now their little secrets are all exposed to for all time now. Anyway, so I digress.
No, it's good. I got to ask a question to Al, because Al, you're the one who started up with was it you who started the ideas with the Badgie lessons, the little Badgie boxes that are interspersed? Because this is the first chapter we see that. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I had this idea when because I worked on the new species life paths, and I just put like a little 2-sentence blurb in there that Badgie might report out on about each of the species, and it was typical Badgie snarkiness, and I was like, this might not even make it through. But it's fun. It ties the species into a bigger picture. I was like, and it gives us the Badgie feel. So I said, let's pass it through. And I sent it into Jim, and it turns out they loved it. And Michael, you had to write some more, right?
Yeah. Next thing I know, Jim is saying, "Hey, your chapter's a little boring, so you're gonna need to add some Badgie boxes into them." I was all offended, but it's okay. He asked me to be funny. I could do that. So yeah, I went back and read yours. I was like, oh, okay, I get that voice. Let's go do it. It was fun. So hopefully people, if you read them, you'll know all the Easter egg episodes I reference in them from Badgie. It's really funny. His cynical side. I have a question for you too, Jim, about the art. Since, of course, this art is replete with amazing Lower Decks art. Is any of it original, or is it all pulled from scene captures?
Yeah, we commissioned a whole bunch of original art, and I want to give a tip of the big hat to my art director, Ariel Orea. He's been our art director on Star Trek Adventures for a few books now. He's doing a fabulous job. I think he's leveling up the game. Like our art was really good before under the previous art directors, but I think he's been able to bring it to another level, and he's continuing to do that book after book after book. But I kind of asked him. I said, look, we're going to do this Lower Decks book. I really want it to be all the art to be in the style of Lower Decks. Do you have in your Rolodex of artists enough people who can match the style? Because I knew that Mike McMahon and the team over at Titmouse would be very particular about their artwork, and sure enough, they were very particular about it. But he found some artists who could do a great job matching the style of the characters and the look and feel of Lower Decks. It's very, obviously Lower Decks has a very specific look and feel to it. And so there's, 30 or 40 original pieces in the book, as well as a whole bunch of, screen caps. We were able to use high-res screen caps from the show, which was a godsend because A, that's a money saver, but B, it just worked out so nicely that a lot of the topics we wrote about in the book, there was an episode or a scene or something from an episode that like thematically fit that chunk of text. And when you can match the text with the art on any given layout or page in a book, it's just like, that's perfect. That's the perfect match. So in an ideal world, like the quotes at the beginning of the chapters and the art and the text all work together as a unified whole. And I just love seeing that come together because it's so much better. Well, not better. It's so much more interesting to look at for me because, I spend months and months and months looking at the Word documents, revising, formatting, editing, cleaning them up, getting them ready. And then I hand it off to the layout people, and then they bring the graphics in and they bring the design, and it's like, oh, it's actually a book now. This is exciting. Like it's a whole new thing now. It gives me a different chance to look at it in a different way with fresh eyes. And then I see a whole bunch of new typos or a whole bunch of new errors. And it's like, shit, I didn't see that when I was staring at the Word document for the umpteenth millionth time. Like the typos disappear because you just don't see them anymore. Because you
read it backwards. Read it back. Got to read it backwards. Yeah. That's what I was told. Backwards
and upside down and all that stuff. But, yeah. So the Badgie lessons, just to digress a little bit, the Badgie lessons were an inspired idea. I love that we just put the hammer down and just went full throttle with all of them and put as many of them in here as we could. I will be the first to admit, though, and this is a little look behind the scenes, is this was probably one of the very few books that we've done in 7 years where we actually got a lot of notes on the text, and I was kind of expecting it because I knew that Lower Decks is very important to Mike McMahon and to the production teams. I was expecting some notes, but the big one was tone, and the second one was voice. Like some of the character voices were just a little off from what they expected, and the Badgie sidebars. This is the sad reality of working on RPGs, is that sometimes when I get notes as the project manager, I don't have enough time to go out to the writers and say, hey, I need you to rewrite this. I need, here's the notes from the studio. I need you to rewrite this and then get it back to me. And then for me to get back to the review team and whatnot. More often than not, even though I would love to do that, because partly it's a developmental opportunity for me to give to you as writers to help you stretch your skills and get better at what you do, right? Even though you're already great. I don't always have that opportunity to say, here's the notes from the studio, apply those notes, and then we'll go back. So sometimes I have to do the rewriting, which like I hate to do it, but in the terms of like budget and time and everything, I have to do it.
We're all thinking, we don't care. We got paid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't believe that though. Like I know you guys are getting paid, but I think you guys are more passionate about this like I am. And I think you do care. Like I don't think you're like, none of you are here for the money. I can guarantee that because I know I'm not, because there's just not that much money in the RPG industry, right? I mean, come on. But anyway, so I will just give you all a blanket apology and say, I'm sorry I had to rewrite some of this stuff. When we get dictates from the studios saying, this isn't funny enough, or this is too malicious. Like there was a couple Badgie sidebars that the first draft was actually kind of like over the line malicious. which I was like, well, I mean, it's Badgie. He's mean.
I'm
But
shrinking off. For those who can't see, I'm shrinking off screen right now.
I wasn't naming names, but of course, by this point, I mean, it's been over a year. I don't remember who wrote everything.
I'm hoping I'm not the one that gave advice on those either.
Was it about barbecuing the baby newts? Was that it?
Maybe.
Okay.
But anyway, so that was the funny thing is like some of the notes were this Badgie sidebar is not Badgie enough. Go more Badgie, and then this Badgie sidebar is too malicious. Bring it back a little bit. So it's like a lot of tweaking and tinkering and turning the dials a little bit to get it dialed in. So that was a lot of work, but it was fun and like clearly the review team at Paramount and Titmouse really appreciated what we were trying to do and we're really into it. So I appreciate them as well. So thanks to Marion and to Mike and to everybody at Paramount and Titmouse for all that stuff. So so there's that. I also want to add, she wasn't able to make it tonight because of family commitments, but Rachel, or maybe Rachel, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. I think it's Rachel, but Rachel Cruz wrote a lot of the sidebars in the first several chapters. And my challenge to her was, I want you to write personal log sidebars for each of the main characters, and I want them to connect. I want there to be a narrative in here from one personal log to the other personal log. And that's pretty much all the advice I gave her. I said, go have fun. You know, I want one Boimler, one Dr. Ta'ana, one Shax, you know, one for everybody, and make it Lower Decksy and fun. And so you'll see that ongoing storyline. Like the sidebars may not necessarily fit the subject matter of the actual chapter, but just the way they were placed in there. I want you all to just check those out, have fun with those readers. So enjoy that. Was there anything else I wanted to add about that? No. And again, like John said, I think we did a really nice job, you know, not to pat myself on the back because my hat's in the way, but bridging that gap between Dominion War, the movies, the next gen movies, and the start of Lower Decks. There's a swath of time in there that a lot of stuff is happening, like technologically, socially, within Starfleet, outside of Starfleet, all the other polities that we reference. You know, we talk a little bit about the Klingons, we talk a little bit about the Romulans.
We probably shouldn't rush by that too fast because I'm curious. Yeah. I have questions about who wrote those sections and if there's any Easter eggs we should know about. So you know what? First of all, though, go ahead. If you can't pat yourself on the back because you're hat, just go ahead and pat yourself on the front, and now we can move on talking about the different polities. Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's just jump into it. I'm done talking.
It's okay. Klingon Empire. Is somebody here one of the people who wrote up the deets on the Klingon Empire from the Lower Decks perspective? I was guessing John Kennedy on that one.
You know, I think if it wasn't John, it must have been Rachel.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's a good guess, but I think Rachel's the one who did Klingons.
Yeah.
Okay. Romulans. Who did Romulans? Rachel?
I think Romulans was me, actually.
I think that was John.
Yeah.
Don't you love when you forget?
You're the standard bearer for Romulans among us. So I'm pretty sure that was you.
I think I've written Romulans in 5 books now. So
because you're good at it, that's why I keep coming back to you.
Honestly, you're the only reason now I know the plot to Insurrection. Your paragraph was so clear. I really appreciated that, by the way.
Yeah. Just been a huge Romulan fan. Like, I always thought they were really cool bad guys. And, I'm probably also one of the few people that likes Nemesis because, you know, it was basically just 2 episodes of Next Generation. And for me, that's enough.
Did I just get I named the wrong movie? Was it Nemesis?
Okay.
Okay.
Nemesis is the Tom Hardy movie.
Sorry, I told you I'm the average geek, not the ultimate geek. Sorry.
Oh, no, I get totally pedantic. I have to dial myself back all the time. So don't feel bad. Do you want me to talk about Romulans for a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, with Romulans, it's nice to see them from a different perspective. And for this book, I know that one of the goals we had was also like, we wanted to do a Lower Decks book, but also what if Lower Decks is your first exposure to Star Trek? So we had to really quickly run everybody through who the Romulans were. And they might not have understood all the jokes in the show about them. Then we had to be like, okay, here's the Romulans. Here's what they're up to. Here's what they're doing after the Dominion War. And it was just nice to talk about the Romulans and be like, oh, yeah, this is the Dominion War was the beginning of their decline, and being able to talk about how so much is changing, and they had a huge government overhaul, and you'd think it would end, like a brand new start for the Romulans. But anybody who watched the 2009 Trek movie, it doesn't get better from here. But I really liked talking about, just a humorous take on history, because I think everyone learns better when you're enthused and you're entertained. Like, I've taught classes at a museum before, and it's always those people who are like sitting off to the side, don't want to be there. And if somebody's just droning on and talking about how, like, did you know that Indiana has had 2 constitutions and we had to sign a new one 3 years later? And it was a very, very warm day, so they signed it outside under a tree. And it's like, oh, no, that's neat. When that comes up on Jeopardy, that'll win me the $200 spot. Thank you. But with this book, you want to talk about all of the good things. You want to talk about, like, why Romulans are interesting bad guys. And just, like you mentioned, Michael, you didn't really care much for Nemesis, but this got you up to speed really quickly.
Yeah, so much so I didn't remember the name of the movie. Is that horrible?
I get things mixed up all the time. Don't feel bad.
My wife says the most resounding part of this chapter, by the way, because she actually likes Lower Decks, and so she was interested in this, is, of course, the personal log you did for the first Gorn to enlist in Starfleet on page 21. That one had her cracking up. And I'll let people read it themselves. It's actually, I know you took a lot of time, crafting the sentences and the dialogue there. But to me, that really got to the heart of, like, the Gorn, as an empire and as a person. So I just want everyone to go look at page 21, the inset box with the Gorn, deep stuff. I mean, I really think that Mike McMahon is probably going to rip some of that and put it in the show. I'm positive of it. Watch.
Poetry.
If anybody wants to do a live reading of that when they get their books and post it to YouTube, I'd love to see it.
In fact, if someone does do a library, I'm not lying right now. If someone, first one on Star Trek Adventures are on our Facebook page, or you can put it on the Discord channel. But if you do a live reading of that, and the first person to post it up there, I'm going to give you my email address on Discord, and I will personally send you a Lower Decks book. Boom. How do you like that? You heard it here first on Continuing Conversations. All right. First live reading to get that. And it has to be after the book comes out officially. I don't want someone to find a way to do it before, how these scandalous people are sometimes. But that's my rule. Good, John, because it's deep stuff. I'm telling everyone, deep stuff.
Very deep.
Right.
So who wrote the Packlids? Was that you, Michael? Yeah.
That was my person. That was my, I want to say the section on Packlids is my love letter to Jim Johnson. I want everyone to know it's my love letter to Jim Johnson for pulling me into this. I totally springboarded off of the work and the seeds you and the writers had planted about the Packlids, because actually it blew my mind. I'm not joking for a moment. I now believe the Packlids are the most dominant and threatening enemy that the Federation have ever faced. And this clues you set back in the core rulebook about it actually had me rolling in bed at night in a cold sweat. Like, how did I miss this? So I'm going to let people read it themselves. I'm not going to spoil it at all. You have to read, but when you put it all together, it's actually like if you could look at my wall right now, I have Post-it notes with string and pictures and all this stuff where it all makes total sense. But I'm going to save it for people till after they get the book. So, Jim, what did you think about when you finally read how I was able to put an end cap on the seeds you had started?
Well, I will. My first reaction was, this is great. I loved it because I just had this weird thing about Packlids, and I just really appreciated that you built on what we've already done and just continued that thread, right? And then one of my later thoughts was I was actually really jealous for a while because, being so firmly entrenched now as the project manager, I don't have time to write anymore. Like, I would love to write more on these books. I've been writing less and less on these books as it's gone on because I just don't have the time. I'm too busy editing and coordinating and doing all the fine tuning behind the scenes, right? So, like, in a different world, I would have written this chapter, absolutely. But I knew that I just did not have the time. And so obviously I asked you to do it. And I'm just grateful that you picked up all those threads and you went back and you looked for them and you found them. because you readers out there, if you're not reading carefully, you're missing stuff, because we drop all kinds of stuff into these books because these books are dense, right? I mean, this Lower Decks book is 250 pages, right? That's a lot of content, and you can't just do one-off jokes for 250 pages without it being deadly dull. So there's just a lot of other content in here, and it's true for all of our books. Like all of our books, I'll be honest, probably run a little long, and I don't think there's a lot of filler. I mean, this is just my opinion.
No, yeah.
Fans can tell us otherwise, but I mean,
here's where I'm going to cry though, Jim, and I know we'll be hugging each other from 3,000 miles across space. Yeah. But Mike McMahon, come on, the creator of the show, read this chapter and let it fly. So if the theory we purport in here actually shows up on a future Lower Decks, come on, man, that's going to be pretty deep.
Maybe. I will say not specifically this chapter, but there were certain chapters. Well, maybe there was a couple of lines here and there. There were some things that we built in, like collectively, that we wrote into the book that were extrapolating. Like we were kind of guessing where they might be going in some cases. And there were a couple of places where we got notes saying, "Oh, we need you to take this out. We need you to take this out. We need to take this section out," because they were already working on season 3 and 4. And there are specific plot lines in 3 and 4 that they want to develop more fully in the show that they did not want us to touch in the book. So there are chunks of text that I had to excise, and obviously the fans aren't going to know. But I'll just leave it up to you all to figure it out. Like, you're gonna have to go look at your drafts. You're gonna have to go look at your drafts and compare it to the final just to see what they cut, and maybe you can think about what they did or what they're going to do later this year when the season 4 comes out. But for the most part, they left it alone. There were, like I said, there's a couple of things they wanted us to cut just to give them because obviously they run the show, right? They own the canon, and they didn't want us accidentally touching on things that they were going to expand upon later. Most of this Pac-Led chapter stayed as is, which I was thrilled beyond belief because.
Well, the last thing you posted, or the first thing you posted when you advertised, StarTrek.com, the page they chose to post was a piece from the Pac-Led chapter, which I ended up getting a lot of love about. Not me personally, but the book got about how Pac-Led survive in space, which I thought was super cool. So I thought that was a good chapter for them to, or section for them to put out there, which is awesome.
Yeah. So Pac-Leds, and then we talk about all other polities. And Al, I believe you wrote a big chunk of this one, especially and we talked about the collectors a little earlier in the show. And I just love the fact that we were able to drop in a random table here about maybe your crew encounters a collector's collection. So Al, talk a little bit about that.
So I was excited because, again, remember, we're filling in these holes, and what Lower Decks does really well is they introduce new species, new factions, and things like that. So where do they fit into the galactic scheme is kind of where my head was at for this section. And when I started writing the Collectors Guild, I knew right away that I needed to get a really fun D20 random table in there with a bunch of random stuff. So I dug pretty deep on some of these. Some, are pretty much surface level, but a couple of them are pretty deep, and I think that you guys will have a fun time going through that list.
Can we go through our favorites? Because I definitely saw one that made me crack up laughing because I got the reference right away.
Which one was your favorite?
Mine was number 17, a leather holy book with Galactic Army of Light written upon its cover.
Yeah, I figured that would be your favorite. That's a good one. Yeah, I just think that they are. I tried to get little bits from like every series in there as some type of reference. And if you remember correctly, Starfleet was brought on to check out this collector's collection, the one that had passed away, because Starfleet wanted to see if there was any like weapons in there. So of course I had to put, a couple of active weapons on the D20 list and so on and so forth. So so that was a fun one. And then we moved into the Drukmani Scavengers, who I thought were really, really cool, when they were introduced initially. And then, then all of a sudden we started getting more and more stuff about them in season 3. So I'm I'm excited to see where that faction goes and how they find a place in the galaxy, because they're definitely starting to flex, I think, a little bit, figuratively and literally.
You did a great job with them.
Thanks. We got the Temerians in here, right? Because we have our first Temerian crew member. And if you were ever wondering what some of those metaphors mean, I put a metaphor list in there for you. And then we get into the Orions and how are the Orions capitalizing in this post-war void. That was a lot of fun.
I love the Temerian phrases because I learned new ones, and it's like, these are all great, and I wish I had more friends to use these with. So
I think it's going to be the launching point for people too who want to play a Temerian, to expand on this. And I could see inside jokes like having people rolling off the table when they come up with their own metaphors and meanings.
Yeah, I would say these are about 75% like terms that were actually used in the scripts, and then probably 25% are ones that I kind of made up to make it sound like they're mythos.
I'm dying to know which ones are, like Mardo in front of the assembly. Did you make that one up?
Off the top of my head, I think that one's actually a real one.
Embarrassment due to tripping. that was just so real.
Yep. All right, great. And then we wrap up the chapter talking briefly about some of the notable worlds that we've seen in Lower Decks. I think, like I mentioned at the top of the show, and we talked about a little bit, they managed to pack a lot of information into all these episodes. And a lot of these, it's almost like the traditional original series Next Gen, where it's the planet of the week, new planet, new situations, new things, new places to go check out. And so we tried to hit as many as we could in the first couple seasons there, and I think we managed to fit in 8 or 9 or maybe 10 in here, as much as I can squeeze in given the page constraints. If you remember some of the planets from the first few seasons and want to include those in your game, either as just a touch point or a actual destination, then you have some options there. And I think Al, I think you wrote most of those too, didn't you?
Yeah. So I proposed these to you because I was like, again, they're creating all of these cool new locations, and most of it's just surface level information. Couple of these planets they spend some time on or have entire episodes around. But one of the things that I really wanted to do is start. I know we've been talking on this podcast for a while about using traits. And how we can get traits as part of of your storytelling. So one of the things I was really focused on was getting the traits of these planets posted in the book, because each of these planets is unique and has cool things happening there. And I just wanted to make sure that was noted in the traits, so that when you do go and visit, this is something that you have to always be remembering in the background.
Very nice. I love Packlet, of course. Strong.
Yeah,
as their traits.
Appreciate that one. All right, so that brings us to the end of chapter 1, and then the end of this episode. So we'll wrap it up here, I think. And as is our usual routine here on continuing conversations, we'll go around and give out our gratitude. So, Michael, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I am going to say thank you to Games of Berkeley. And they are, of course, they have a healthy stock of Star Trek Adventures game that aren't only available when you walk in the store, but even if you purchase online. So they're giving people various access to the hard copy books that way. They're a mainstay in that university city for decades now. So that's my shout out to them. Pass the baton over to Aaron.
I'm going to give a non-game shout out. I was at a Fleet Museum of sorts this past weekend, and I'm going to give a shout out to the Kalamazoo Air Zoo, where I actually had a really good time. It's not my first time being there, but they have some really great exhibits. Always worth going to learn new things about aviation history.
Nice. Al, what's your gratitude for this week?
I just want to say thank you to the folks with the Tabletop Journeys podcast. They had me on this past week to talk about momentum and termination and values and things like that. So it was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate them and anyone who's producing content for Star Trek Adventures. The more people that we get talking about it, the more eyes we get on the product, and the more players that we have. So I appreciate everything they do for us. John?
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. John.
Real quick, am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah.
Okay. Then my shout out actually goes to the Star Trek shitposting group on Facebook. That is a group that never fails to entertain. It is kept me up to date with so much that comes out with Star Trek, and it's just fun. I know that I've gone through a really difficult time lately. My family's gone through a bunch of illnesses, and nothing really makes you smile than just taking a break from like walking through hospitals or from moving houses, sitting down, and then you see really, really dumb memes. And I just want you to know that sometimes the commentary is really truthful, and sometimes the commentary is just really spot on. And sometimes it's just so random, you're laughing and you can't even explain the joke to the next person. So just thanks to all you guys doing the hard work and making people laugh. You've really made me laugh.
Awesome.
Fantastic. All right, Jim with the hat.
Big hat, me. I will. Gosh, where do I even start? Well, obviously, I mean, I need to thank Paramount and Titmouse and Mike McMahon and everybody on that side of things for giving us the license to even do Lower Decks. Like, I mean, obviously they had faith in what we've been doing over the last 7 years, and that's a testament to everybody on the Modiphius side and all the freelancers that we've hired and brought on board, and me shepherding you through all this rocks and shoals and getting it to where we are. And they said, okay, we want you to do a Lower Decks thing or do something with Lower Decks. Here's the license. Go have fun. And we delivered it, and they were really happy with it. Like the manuscript we delivered and the art we delivered was probably like 94-95% there, and they just needed to give us that guidance to help us get it the rest of the way. And just grateful to all of them, all the hard work that they put in, especially the review team. Gosh, they're responsible for reviews for literally everything Star Trek, right? I mean, our stuff is a lot of reading, but they've got to deal with everything else, like the toys, the clothes, the tchotchkes, the models, like everything you can imagine that's branded Star Trek goes through their hands. And it's like they're always busy. And then convention season hits and they're off to the conventions. And it's like, oh my gosh, I just can't even imagine. Like, I would love to do that job, but it would be a lot of work. You'd have to really, really love Star Trek. And of course, I know I do. And I know you all do too. It'd just be a different world, I think. So thanks to all of them. And then for this episode, I'll just end it by saying thanks to all the fans. Again, y'all, I'll echo what John says, like, and Al even. You're out there, you're doing the streams, you're doing the videos, you're doing the actual plays, you're doing the conversations on all the different social media, all the different game boards. That is intangible benefits that we can't thank you enough for, because you're fans, you're excited, you're energized, you're talking about the game. You're getting more people into the game, and that's a win. Like the tide lifts everybody, right? And it's just so much fun nowadays to go to social media and to hear people enjoying the game, talking about the game, asking the questions, or answering the questions. Because we're lucky in that new fans are coming into this game every day, like every week, especially on the fan run Facebook group, the Star Trek Adventures Facebook group. Like every week, the moderator posts the new list of members who join that week. And it's usually 20, 30 new people every week. And consistently the same group of people are on there saying, hey, welcome aboard, have fun, go check out this search engine, go, get involved, have some conversations, tell us about what you love about Star Trek and about the game and what questions do you have. So I love that because it shows that the game has a healthy fan base, and I'm grateful for that. So keep doing what you're doing, because you guys are awesome, guys and ladies and everybody in between. And different and unusual, and keep it up, and hopefully we'll do you good, because we got lots of cool stuff coming. But right now we're all about Lower Decks, and it's we're stronger together, infinite diversity, infinite dimensions, Let's go.
All right. IDIC, double hands. All right. We'll see you around chapter 2 next week. Thank you, Aaron, John, Al, for coming on the show to talk about your contributions.
Yep. Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll talk to you all next time.